Our school is organised into stage rather than grade groupings. Given that I had 4 classes willing to attempt the assessment, I thought I could use the opportunity to incorporate a few variables through differing approaches to partnering with students, allocating partners randomly in 2 classes, asking the teacher to assign partners according to his idea of their collaborative suitability in another class, and allowing students to select their own partners in the 4th class. I hope this might provide some insight into whether either of these variables may impact upon student performance. Unfortunately, we encountered a range of technical issues, and despite implementing a range of recommendations, after 3 attempts with 3 classes, we had no data. After continued tweaking, we decided to try using iPads and mini iPads. Although a number of issues prevailed, we were able to persist to the point where we were able to procure a class set of data for the class where the teacher had allocated partners. However, as these partnerships had been determined prior to the first attempt on the task, and there was a slight change in class composition due to absences on either day, there were a few students who were randomly partnered. However, there were a number of factors which must be considered in analysis, as they have possibly tainted the data and impacted on the results. Because the students were using mobile devices and many students were in need of technical assistance, there was considerable movement around the classroom, and some students were gravitating towards their partners, resulting in some sections of the assessment being completed with the assistance of visual and spoken communication rather than purely online communication. Also, there was cross-pollination of collaboration, with students assisting each other beyond partnerships. Some changes occurred in partnerships during the assessment tasks. Because of this, some students had to leave prior to the completion to attend special classes, and others gave up in frustration, students who had not been able to access the assessment due to technical difficulties paired up with those left without a partner. Further communication afterwards with the IT service desk escalated the intensity of support, with a regional support person agreeing to visit during an attempt to administer the assessment. By the time of his visit, after observing and assisting, his suggested diagnosis was that the network had insufficient capacity to cope with the volume of students accessing the one site. His suggestion was to try to administer it with only 2 or 3 pairs of students to begin with, and on the next attempt, and if this was successful, to gradually increase the number of pairs until the capacity was determined for future attempts. For the purpose of this assignment, they would run out of time. So for the meeting, despite 6 attempts, we only had 1 set of class data, of questionable data. So therefore, most of the discussion with Stage 3 team was quite generalised. Due to the limited time frame, we only managed to fit in 1 meeting, and therefore items were only discussed briefly. We commenced the meeting examining and discussing the progressions of cognitive and social skills for collaborative problem solving from Module 1 of Assessment and Teaching of 21st Century Skills. Teachers were asked to think of 2 students believed to be at differing levels of collaborative problem solving ability and place them along each progression. They were asked to examine each sentence within each level, highlighting sentences as appropriate for each student and determining the ZPD for each student by gauging a midpoint. We then briefly examined the data resulting from the assessment. Beginning with class reports for cognitive and social, the immediate reaction was surprise at many of the results, with disparity between where teachers would have expected students to fall on their progressions and where they actually fell according to the assessment. It was apparent that the teachers had perceived a high correlation between academic performance and cognitive problem-solving skills, and this contributed to their surprise. Another discussion arising from the data was the almost pendulum swing in the spread of data between cognitive and social skills. It was noted that 3 students who were further along the cognitive skills progression than the remainder of the class at level 4 were also at the furthest level along the social skills progression at level 5, whereas another 3 students at level 5 along the social skills progression were at the lowest level achieved across the class along the cognitive skills progression, which was level 2. Considering all the variables that may have impacted on the data and disparity between teacher expectations and the actual results, the reliability of the data was not considered very high, particularly in terms of individual student information, but there was agreement that it was definitely worth consideration in general terms. With this in mind, we then briefly examined the Learning Readiness Report for cognitive and social skills before discussing general goals for each of the levels for each skill set. It was agreed that the skills and abilities for each stage provide the direction for goal setting. However, in order to make these goals more specific, online assessment needs to be supplemented with further observation Firstly, to give further weight to the estimation, and secondly, to identify any elements of the stage description the student or students may already be displaying and those aspects requiring further development. Through comparison of student data, it was believed that in most cases, goals could be developed that would suit a number of students. A suggestion briefly discussed was the idea of sharing the learning readiness reports with students. It was argued that the students' opinions as to the accuracy of the reports may be valuable in determining the degree of validity and that it may assist in increasing student ownership of their learning. The teachers were all keen to pursue the completion of the assessment, along with observation of their students guided by the statements of the learning progression, in order to develop learning goals for their students. Once this had been achieved, the next step will be to develop teaching and learning strategies to support the students in moving to the next step in the progression. Implications for instruction include ensuring understanding the significance of 21st century skills and the need to directly, as distinct from indirectly, teach them through explicit instruction within key learning area content with learning intentions and specific success criteria. Understandably, fitting the explicit teaching of 21st century skills into an already crowded day or week will be the greatest concern for teachers. Exploring and determining ways of incorporating this within existing curriculum is key to ensuring this. So possibilities for these opportunities include increased awareness of online collaborative tasks, the value of integrating multiple skills, for example, collaboration, problem solving and ICT, as in collaborative problem solving, other 21st century skills that would integrate well together, avenues for explicitly teaching, assessing 21st century skills that would fit in easily into existing programs such as science and technology, English and maths, and extracurricular activities such as Kidpreneur. And ICT skills progression could and should be incorporated into our ICT program, where our ICT coordinator team teachers to upskill teachers in developing these students' IT skills. Further implications include opportunities to apply the high-level social skills that were represented across all learning situations and possibly in addressing behavioural concerns. Also, the value of learning progressions in identifying student points of readiness and further learning needs, and the gradual and collaborative development of a range of teaching and learning strategies, activities and content. The exercise also raised some questions, such as whether teachers should focus on one domain for a student when there's disparity between the two, or continue to try and build multiple domains. Also, whether the integration of ICT skills, of 21st century skills would possibly not be as feasible with younger students due to their developmental levels. So then, implications for teacher development. First and foremost, teacher professional learning needs to ignite passion in our teachers towards the vital importance of 21st century skill development for our students. The intensity of passion is required to overcome the difficulties of managing to address all that we are meant to address within a day, week, term or year. Once the relevance has been internalised, each of the general capabilities need to be explored in depth in order for teachers to make authentic connections to key learning area content, rather than the current situation where in most cases teachers see the icon beside a content descriptor and consider that they have therefore addressed the capability. When it is intended that there is a shift from indirectly addressing a skill or capability to systematically and explicitly teaching it, it is important that the whole staff are involved in making informed decisions about implementation and professional learning. One such implementation decision might centre around whether as a staff we move one step at a time, concentrating our own learning and teaching on one or two skills, or whether we address them all as indicated in the syllabus. Through concentrating on one or two, deeper understanding could be achieved before the applied skill is embedded and a new focus can be decided upon. Agreeing to focus on one or two in combination at a time would also be more conducive to staff buy-in. With each skill, professional learning around the provision or creation of a developmental progression, assessment to ascertain students' ZPD, and teaching and learning activities would be required. It's also likely that many teachers would seek or require support in upgrading their ICT skills in order to feel proficient in guiding and facilitating student development of 21st century skills. So in terms of school policy, the general capabilities along with cross-curriculum priorities and other learning across the curriculum areas are incorporated into the content of all the New South Wales syllabuses for the Australian curriculum. Currently, it's an expectation that the general capabilities are incorporated into teaching and learning programs, but unlike planning for learning intentions, success criteria and differentiation, there are no school guidelines mandating their inclusion. With the introduction of new syllabuses each year, the review and updating of school policies, with the exception of student welfare, has been put on hold for the last few years. As Steve Denham says, if you have 14 priorities, it's about 11 too many. With teachers lamenting an ever-increasing workload and school leaders aware of the legitimacy of these claims, that the general capabilities are intended to be incorporated into existing KLA content is conducive to their inclusion in the curriculum. However, more is required to ensure that it's systematically and explicitly addressed. For this, clever and strategic planning, identifying opportunities for explicit and developmental teaching of particular 21st century skills within key learning area content is paramount. So a possible way of providing such an opportunity after adequate and relevant professional learning would be either to mandate the devotion of a specified time allocation during termly stage team collaborative planning days to the development of teaching and learning activities within a given key learning area, which explicitly teach a 21st century way of thinking, way of working, or both, or to do so within the context of lesson study, and embedding such practice within the annual professional learning calendar. Another way to bring 21st century skills to the front page, increasing accountability for their inclusion, would be to mandate the general capabilities in reporting to parents. For the purpose of reporting, it would be imperative that developmental progressions were available for each of the general capabilities, or a combination of skills such as that in collaborative problem solving. It may be necessary to create such progressions, and sufficient time and resourcing would need to be provided to do this. To ensure success, such implementations would need to be deliberately and strategically planned and implemented, possibly starting with one or a few skills such as collaborative problem solving or critical and creative thinking to ensure depth and quality before moving on to another. Finally, in order to ensure technological capability, regular monitoring of the network and hardware is required to make sure upgrades occur in a timely manner.